Well, I bring a big exhibit display because I subscribe to the idea of go big or go home. So we have, for those of you who know about EMX royalty, you know, there's a lot of moving parts to the company. It's a pretty complex story. So fasten your seatbelts and let's get rolling. I've got 13 slides to go through. All right, so we employ a three-prong approach to business. We have our royalty generation at the top, where we use prospect generation and partners to advance our properties. And then when we vend those properties out, when we sell those properties off or joint venture those, then we hold a royalty behind, which is something we've always done since we were first publicly traded in the first week of December of 2003. So we've been building this royalty portfolio now for 14 years. And we decided to implement that name change, like Gwen mentioned previously, to more clearly reflect our current business activities. So, you know, the conventional royalty business model is to simply write big checks. We largely grow our royalty portfolio organically through our own host of projects, although we do supplement that with acquisitions of royalties when we can find those at favorable pricing levels. And then third on, we have strategic investments. When we find projects or companies that we think are substantially undervalued in the marketplace and have gone largely unrecognized, we may take a strategic investment in them, and we'll get into that here in a few slides. These are the primary areas of activity that we're engaged in around the world. You can see the southwestern United States. In Arizona, we're looking for big copper down there. We have a number of very sharp guys on our team whose real expertise is in copper porphyry projects. We also have a lot of opportunities in Nevada. Serbia, we have some very interesting properties there, including a royalty on the big Kukuru Peki copper discovery that Nevsun is advancing right now. And then we're also heavily engaged in Sweden, and we also have a number of properties, royalty properties in Turkey. This kind of shows you how we're sort of divided up. In terms of commodities, our focus has always traditionally been on copper and gold, although we are largely commodity agnostic and that we're willing to embrace other commodity opportunities. In this case, polymetallics, cobalt, copper, PGM things in Scandinavia, things along those lines. Asset class, we have about 49% of our portfolio available for partnership or sale right now. We've been loading up that pipeline. During the downturn, of course, things got really soft. A lot of people dropped a lot of highly prospective mineral real estate, which we were able to pick up and add that to the portfolio. And then about half of our portfolio is in royalty status. And then you can see geographically we're very diverse here too. This is our list of partners around the world, including Newmont, Rio Tinto, Freeport-McMoRan, and so on. You can tell a lot about a company by who owns them. Our biggest single shareholder is Paul Stevens out of San Francisco. Paul Stevens, if you're not familiar with him, made his fortune in a very successful retail mutual fund group called the Robertson Stevens Funds back in the 60s and 70s. And he was obviously the Stevens end of that. Now he largely runs family money, but he also runs some hedge funds too out of the San Francisco area. And he says he's going to take his share ownership right up to 19.9% of our shares. Sprott Global through Rick Rule, of course, and Exploration Capital Partners partnerships holds a huge number of our shares, and there's probably actually twice that amount being held in Sprott accounts cumulatively. They're in discretionary accounts and so on. EMX royalty employees, management, and directors also have a lot of skin in the game. Newmont owns about 6% of us. Antofagasta owns about 1.9% of us. They're a large copper producer out of Santiago, Chile. And then Mason Hill Asset Management out of New York, which is the umbrella company for a number of hedge funds there that holds us, along with Adrian Day, holds a lot of shares in his client accounts. And then you can see we've got a pretty tight share structure. We've got about 87 million shares fully diluted. We've got about 6 million in cash in Canadian dollars. All right, our primary royalty asset is the Leeville royalty on the Carlin Trend in Nevada. This is a very large footprint. You can see it there in the lower image, and that rectangle in the upper portion of the image there is our royalty footprint. Most of the cash that's being generated right now is coming out of the Leeville mine. About 2/3 of it actually coming out of the Leeville mine, about 1/3 coming out of Turf, and then a little bit coming out of Carlin East. And then south of Leeville, you'll see those intercepts that are displayed. So Newmont is making a lot of new discoveries in that area there. So this royalty right here will be paying us out for long after I'm off the face of the earth here. Newmont has also completed $1/3 billion vent shaft. They spent $1/3 billion putting in a shaft that does nothing but pull air out of the mine. There's no man cage there. There's no ore skip there. Nothing. It just pulls air out of the mine. So you can imagine if Newmont spent $1/3 billion to put in a vent shaft, they've identified a tremendous amount of additional mineralization down inside that mining complex there, and we are going to be one of the benefactors of that. Looking on to Turkey. We were some of the first people to go into Turkey about 15 years ago, actually, before we were even publicly traded. And long before it became the flavor of the month a couple of years ago. Obviously, there's been a little bit of a political tumult there of late, but that hasn't really affected mining. And basically, we have all of those properties vended out to, with the exception of one company, which is Passinex, out to small Turkish companies who are advancing the assets or producing them right now. And so even though there's been some political difficulties in the country, that hasn't affected the Turkish mining industry. One of our royalties that is currently paying right now, it's paying about $11,000 a month, but we think this is going to be ramped up substantially here in the next year or two, is called Balya. And this is a lead, zinc, silver property that we bought in government auction back in 2006, I believe, for the equivalent of about $17,000. This is one half of an old lead, zinc, silver mining district that had been laying fallow for decades. Another company called Esson bought the other half of the district. They're currently mining that very actively. They have a 5,000 ton per day mill there, and the people who own our royalty property in the northeast portion of the slide there on the right is called Dedeman Mining, and they actually have a toll milling agreement they've recently signed with Eson to get the ore milled next door. So that's why we think things are going to ramp up there considerably, and they'll be mining this thing for a long, long time because there's a lot of mineralization. A lot of it's very shallow, some of it even daylights at surface, and they've put in a lot of step-out holes there, 100 or 200 meters at a time, and still hit mineralization. So this thing's going to be a real ATM for us in the future. Moving on to Scandinavia. I don't know if many of you are familiar with the Fraser Institute of Mining survey, but that's an annual survey put out by the Fraser Institute that surveys mining companies and what their thoughts are on various jurisdictions around the globe. And they go and survey everything from the political climate, the mineral potential, the rule of law, you just go down all of the criteria that you would perform due diligence on in any jurisdiction, and they examine that. And so Sweden always comes out within the top 3 or so. So this is a very favorable jurisdiction. There's cell phone coverage across the entire country and tremendous mineral potential, and we've got a lot of properties up there. I'm running out of time very quickly here. You can see some of those right here. We also have some properties in Norway. Here's Serbia right here in the lower corner on the right there. That's where the big discovery hole is. We have a 0.5% royalty on that property right there, Kukuropeki. And just to the west of that, it's called the Brestovac West property. We also have a royalty on that. That's 2% on gold and silver and 1% on all other metals. These are recent drill intercepts from Malmish, a project that we have. We're a shareholder in the largest or the controlling interest is called IG Copper. We own 40% of them, and this is a massive copper gold discovery in Russia. And this is our cash flow, and so we're very close to cash flow neutral right now. Once we become cash flow positive, I think you'll see a very material change in the share price. Thank you so much.